Thanks everyone for coming tonight, and welcome to Bringing Civility Back to Civil Discourse, a panel discussion with civic leaders. My name is Sonia Zarnecki. I am co-vice president of the Lawrence-Douglas County League of Women Voters, and we are sponsoring this event. The League's mission is to defend democracy and empower voters. This event was planned by Carol Williamson, our treasurer, Judd Klein, our co-president, Boo Heiberger, president-elect, and myself. Carol and I began discussing the idea for this event during the run-up to the presidential election last year, and at the suggestion of our panelist, Patrick Kelly. Ongoing political violence at the national level and alarming levels of aggression in public meetings and in communication with elected officials have unfortunately made this topic more timely than ever. In his book on freedom, historian Timothy Snyder makes the case that despite how much Americans love to talk about freedom, we don't have a very good definition of what it means. He argues that there are such things as health, happiness, decency, beauty, that freedom means the conditions under which you can choose to bring those things into your world. It's a positive definition of freedom. Many Americans tend to think of freedom mostly in negative terms, as in freedom from. The problem is a barrier, like an oppressive government. The Bill of Rights, for example, defends our freedoms, our liberties to expression, worship, etc., from interference by the government. And it's not that this definition is wrong, Snyder says. It's just incomplete. An example, for the survivors of the death camps of World War II, getting liberated from the camps was not the same thing as being truly free. They had to build back whole lives. There were psychological shackles to overcome, as well as physical ones. Positive freedom comes, he believes, from working together and the political process. Conditions for true freedom must be built up from democratic processes and civic engagement, not just the absence of oppression. How can we use our freedom of expression in ways that support this work? That's what I hope we can get to talking about today. So, about how we'll proceed. The first 30 minutes will be moderated by me, and I will ask panelists to address some questions prepared by the committee and shared with them ahead of time. During this time, audience members are invited to write questions and/or comments on note cards that are available on the table next to the entrance and will be distributed by volunteers. Please return your cards to one of the volunteers. They'll bring cards to me, and I will read your questions and comments aloud. Panelists will have the opportunity to respond. Panelists may also choose to ask questions of the audience, to which audience members are invited to respond via note card. I'll get to as many of these as we have time for during the hour, and all written comments or questions will be given to panelists after the event. At 7 o'clock, we'll end the panel, and audience members are welcome to stay and chat informally with each other or other panelists. In keeping with the theme, the League asks that all participants and audience members behave civilly and respectfully with panelists and with each other. Language and behavior that is disruptive to our event will not be tolerated, and the League reserves the right to remove participants who choose not to abide by these basic rules. I'd like to welcome our panelists, all of whom have had lived experience with and/or expertise about democratic governance and leadership, and do civic discourse for a living. They are Rich Lockhart, Chief of Police; Amber Sellers, Lawrence City Commission; Kelly Jones, USD 497 School Board member and past president of the school board; Kyle Velte, who's on the KU Law faculty; and Patrick Kelly, our Douglas County Commissioner. Thank you all so much for coming today. So I think because of the informal nature of the panel, this is not a candidate forum, I would invite you to answer in whatever order you like. I'm not timing you. So we'll just jump in with the first question and we'll let you guys take it from there. So, what can individuals do to promote civil discourse in our community?
Don't all speak at once.
I'll start. So I think that what we need to do is model good behavior ourselves as leaders. And so in order for people to be civil when they're engaging and disagreeing, it's important for us as leaders to be aware of that. The IACP recently released a resolution, that's the Police Chiefs, International Association of Chiefs of Police, calling on political leaders to tone down their rhetoric. And what it says, I'll just read a couple of the highlights. A disturbing rise in rhetoric from political and community leaders that has contributed to active violence against law enforcement officers, elected officials, and members of the public. But it also recognizes that society has to recognize that there are individuals who are vulnerable, easily manipulated, and dangerously impressionable, and that when public figures or other influential individuals spread hate words, words have consequences, and in the wrong hands, they can become weapons. So the idea is we influence a lot more people than we realize, and when we speak out in ways that aren't recognizing someone else's humanity, we can influence people who maybe are easily influenced to take action, even though we as leaders are not actually doing anything.
Not really.
I don't necessarily wrestle with this. I think it'll come up, it may come up with others. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I think oftentimes when it comes to civil discourse or just the idea of having conversation with elected officials, it's this idea of this notion that it has to be either cantankerous or is adversarial because of what we have been shown and what we've been taught, or at least what we see, that is essentially how you engage with elected officials, and that's years and years of a democratic process that has been nuanced by different systems of oppression and influence, and so that's how we navigate the space. And so I see oftentimes when individuals are, whether they're wanting to just engage in utilizing their voice and be civically active, or if it's in a more organized form of advocacy. What it seems to occur is that we're often participating in these spaces while we're trying to learn the rules of engagement or the system while participating. And that is unfortunate, but that's kind of the nature of where we're at right now, because we don't give space and we don't give grace to educate and inform and bring people on board as they choose to engage. And so, one of the things I always do, or I try to do when I'm engaging with someone either in person or online, is to get a clear understanding of their education and their understanding of the situation which we're discussing, and to give them the grace to know that they may not know all the things, I don't know all the things, and so we're doing this work together. And I think that's just a part of that level setting. I know I shared before with someone about caring and believing, and that in this world, there are things that you just say I care about something, it's making a statement. It's a public statement, declaration of something. Doesn't necessarily mean there's merit or value or other things working behind it. It's just making that statement. Believe is when you give your time, talent, treasure, and capacity for something. You truly believe, you are invested in that. And so oftentimes there are things that I care about that you may believe in, and vice versa. It's not necessarily mean that we're against each other. It just means we need to find our communities to move that very thing. And if I'm not there yet, either you're there to influence me or to recognize that I'm just not there, that you'll plant the seed and will come along, or maybe not. And so I think by sharing with the community about understanding what people care about and what they believe in addition to your elected officials, but mostly the individuals that you live next to, or you don't know, or you may see in passing, to understand what people care and what they believe about, and not see it as something that's adversarial and that you have to be on top or you have to win, there's winners and losers. Because that's not what democracy is about. And this court is recognizing that, we may agree to disagree, but it doesn't mean it has to come with pain or with hurt or with some sense of oppression, of oppressive nature to someone. So just seeking to learn and understand. Sorry about that.
When I first came to the board, I've had a whole career prior to that as a community organizer, essentially, as an activist. And sometimes I was very disruptive in meetings to the point of being asked to leave. So this
Could you speak louder?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I was telling you about a former me who was disruptive and sometimes loud in meetings if there was something that was really moving me. I'm a social worker by trade. I would be in a courthouse and there would be some injustice and I was supposed to be quiet and I just couldn't. There are times where I was working on the behalf of a community or something that was personally relevant to me and I would be loud at the Capitol building and asked to leave. I was engaging in civil disobedience, and I understood that there were consequences for those actions. And when I first started working with Dr. Lewis, who was our prior superintendent, he reminded me of this fact, that when I'm in a boardroom and I have someone that's in front of me that's really upset and maybe angry about something pertaining to their child, they may not behave in a way that we all would presume to be civil, or that I might, from a Eurocentric perspective, say, this is exactly how you should be behaving in this room. And when I police it, as you all understand, I mean, hopefully, with respect to Chief Lockhart, that I sometimes shut down points of view, and that is not my intention. So this is the thing that I go into the board with, this particular point of view. And there were not police officers at our meetings when I started 8 years ago. Now, I would not run a board meeting without a police officer in the room because I am concerned about the safety of individuals in that space. So there has been a very serious shift. And our current superintendent, Dr. Swift, who I think I saw move into this room someplace, there's something I learned from her very quickly. She said to me, as I was concerned about this former self meeting this new self, Kelly, you're not clutching your pearls. You're trying to create a space that's safe for children. This is an extension of our classroom. Like, are you behaving in a way that you would behave in front of a 5-year-old? So in my world, the space that I have to consider is the behavior that I'm modeling when I'm running a school board meeting, does it meet the standard of your grandkid or your kid sitting in front of me, that I would be comfortable with the language that I'm using and the language that you're using, so that hopefully we get to a space where the next generation isn't having a forum about how we have civil conversations.
Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm excited to be part of the conversation. I just have to start by saying, if I talk about the law here, it's based on my scholarship and my research. I'm not here as anyone's lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm here in my personal capacity, not as an employee of the University of Kansas. So with all that lawyer talk aside, I can respond to the question, which is talking about how do individuals promote civil discourse in their community. I think we should start by talking about what community, right? There's many communities we can talk about. There's the community of engagement with public officials on the school board, the state legislature. There's the community of our classrooms. There's the community of our houses of worship. So I think, we might have different answers to different communities that we're talking about within the Lawrence community. And the experience that I've had the most time to spend in is in the law community, in the educational community. And I think that modeling that was mentioned at the top is really important about how I model, how to have difficult conversations in my classrooms, but also in the kind of extracurriculars that happen in the law school. For example, when a student group might invite a controversial speaker in, other student groups and other students are feeling uncomfortable with that speaker, right? Those kinds, that's something that really impacts our community within the law school. So sometimes I try to promote civil discourse by modeling hard conversations in a large group, like in my classrooms. Other times, I might ask to see an individual in my office to talk about impact, right? Impact versus intent is a big thing that we stress in talking about. You might intend to say something that is what you think is kind of a position you want to take on a controversial issue, and free speech rights allow you to do that. But also think about the impact it might have on a listener or other members of the community. I also encourage folks to listen to hear rather than listen to respond. That's particularly difficult when you're training lawyers, when most of the time you're saying listen to respond, not listen to hear. And so we have to unlearn some of those things when we're talking about impacts on our particular community in the law school when it comes to speech and civil discourse. I also think it's important to be really aware of the current moment that we're in, both politically and legally and socially and historically and all of those things, which is that our media landscape right now is super fragmented, right? There are like basically two different universes. There's the kind of the Fox News universe, which has one kind of coverage of what's going on in the world, and then there's the other, I guess I would say the MSNBC universe. And the reason we have such a fragmented media landscape right now, where literally different realities are being created, is you can blame it on the law, right? Because back until the 1980s, there was a doctrine, a federal regulation called the Fairness Doctrine, where you had to like give both sides of a particular issue. You had to like report accurate facts and treat both sides of an issue. And until there was deregulation of that during the Reagan era, there was like 3 networks, right? And so everybody saw the same thing from their living rooms every night. But then we had technology advance, when we had cable, right? Cable news, cable, and we also had ownership rules change. So the law deregulated media so that like 5 companies own 90% of media outlets in our country now, whereas before deregulation, it was multiple owners and only one company could only own like 7 TV stations, right? And we have this fragmentation that's driven by advertising dollars, not fairness. And so the deregulation of media, you're probably wondering why I'm giving you this legal lesson on deregulation, but it really goes to the difficulty that we have in this moment of having civil discourse. Because when people come at things from 2 different realities that have been built by the media, it compounds the problem and the challenge of having civil discourse. So I think it's hard. I'm not saying I have a lot of wisdom to impart here, because beyond trying to listen to hear rather than respond, to model, and to try to find shared values in hard conversations, right? Can we agree, for example, that freedom to speak is something that we can agree is a shared value? Or can we, in particular, when it comes to something like trans kids, can we agree that keeping kids safe and alive is a shared value? And try to start from shared values and then have discussion. And so I guess the last thing I'll say on this is try to talk in person and not online, because there's just such that anonymization of being online, I think, just gives people a freedom to say things they'd never say if they were sitting in a space like this to each other. So I'll stop there for now.
And if we could remind the speakers to keep that mic real close to you, that way it goes on the speaker system and you can be heard better. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for hosting this. And I do want to point out we have some students here, and that's really wonderful. As a former educator, I'm pretty excited about that. And it got me thinking, as this question came up, like, how often are we students within this idea of civic discussions or civil discourse? The question asks what individuals can do, and my, this sounds trite, I guess, but do it. Like, just have discussions. I think so often we avoid conversations with people who maybe disagree with us on some level, because it isn't uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable, and that's a hard feeling to take on when maybe you have, whether it's a different reality that's been created by media, or you have a different way of showing up to a topic than I do. It's going to take work on my part to stay engaged. And that's not to say that you won't hit your limit of tolerance and need to check out. There are times when people are having a conversation with me, and I have lots of civic conversations, where I think, oh, come on, Patrick, stay engaged here, because I want to check out. But I do feel like it's part of my responsibility, and I hope you feel like it's part of your responsibility to stay engaged in that moment, to understand someone else's perspective, to get curious about it, to put what I believe to be true, whether I saw it in the media or not, on hold for a minute and test my assumptions around that idea. The discomfort is real, right? And I think we're all looking for a way for it to be easier and more comfortable, but we're only going to make progress if we're in that zone where we can actually challenge our own thinking and our own ideas and expect that of others too. So it's hard work. I think sometimes we're, in today's society, always looking for something easier when food can be delivered to my bathtub, right? I'm always looking for something that can be done. I'm sorry you had that visual. Sorry. But I think we're always looking for a way for something to be easier. But I point out the students here because they're in a space of learning, and the space of learning happens when you're uncomfortable. And so what we can do individually is accept a little more discomfort in our lives in order to make more progress.
Thank you. So, next question, I'm going to ask everyone to think a little bit more in terms of spaces and practicalities, and think about how people and local leaders, such as yourselves, can work together to create spaces. I'm not saying safe spaces, but spaces that are good for this kind of discourse that supports democratic deliberation. So that the problem-solving aspect of the work we do in our community as a city, as a county.
Well, maybe this is a time for a question for you all to ponder on. What is your expectation for a safe space? And is that a safe space for the things you want to hear, or just the things that you don't want to hear, right? I think I don't know if this is where you're going, Sonia, but I will say the pressure on someone who is in an elected position to create a space for civil discussion is pretty daunting, right? Especially when there's specific case law about what we can and cannot do, and multiple interpretations of that case law. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been on the commission now for 7 years and have been the chair a couple of times, and done a lot of thinking about what is our responsibility in this space. And I go back to what is the responsibility for public comment, and where does public comment come from? Public comment, it was actually pre-internet, pre-email, pre-phone. It goes all the way back to when the colonizers couldn't redress their government, right? And so they thought it was important to be able to actually talk to those who represent you in government. That's the purpose of public comment, is to give the public an opportunity to address those who are elected to represent them with what they're thinking. It is not the place for a conversation. That's not a good place to have that. It is not a real good place for us to take a referendum vote. And sometimes I will tell you, it feels like that's the purpose for those who are there. If we have enough people here, you'll understand that we've all voted and this is what you should do. It is merely to hear your opinion, how you feel on that topic. I have a responsibility to make sure we have efficient and orderly meetings. We have rules in place for that limited public forum. Outside of that, I'm not sure I have a huge responsibility to do that. We all do, right? We all have to work to create public spaces and private spaces that allow us to exchange ideas and challenge our own ideas in a place that at least promotes some civility, that we can continue to stay in that space and do that work. What that is for you, Kyle, may be very different for me. What that is for Amber may be very different for me. And I have my own agency to sort of speak up when I think it isn't that.
Thank you.
In fact, I appreciate that sentiment. I think for me, sometimes it gets a little bit pitchy when I hear people say like, what can you do, what can you do? Because I want to know, are you looking to me as an authority figure? Are you looking to me as a leader, an elected official? What are you looking to me to answer this question? Because I don't want to answer it from the perspective of an elected official, because then that gives it the perception of governance. And we shouldn't be, the idea that there are state laws, there's statutes, there's precedents that discusses, to Patrick's point, about public comment. And so to me, again, it gets back to what is the space for? Is it a space to learn? Is it a space to be in community with others that don't think like you? Or are you just wanting a space so that I can hear all the things and respond, not respond? Are we doing collective work? So I think, the idea of, I don't want, I'm gonna use a lot of KLC terms here, but I'm gonna give the work back in this sense that I don't want, in this space, I don't want government to tell you all how to engage, because there's so much more to the engagement that needs to happen just in community. That there are, to Kyle's point, there are subgroups within our community here in Lawrence. You can speak to that. You can ask yourself, of all the subcultures in our community, how many of them have you had conversations about the business of the city and how things run, and infrastructure and healthcare and all the things that we're passionate about? So it's one of those things where to limit yourself to 3 minutes, 3 Tuesdays out of the month, how many ever Wednesdays, and you all just crank them out, so. That's a lot. But no, it's just that is just not it. And so there's so much more that I think it fuels the idea of why the engagement is so intense when we do meet each other, whether it's in a commission setting or whatnot, because we feel like that's all you have, and that's not all you have. So instead of looking at it as I'm trying to create a solution based on the problem, figure out a way to resolve the problem or the concern of, I don't have just 3 minutes. What can we do to be more? And how do you have those conversations with folks in the community that you don't normally engage with, so that you have just as much as a worldly or worldly view of the things that we seek to do? And I get it, we, as I share with state elected officials and federal elected officials, I may or may not voted for you, but you do represent me. And so I share that with individuals in the community, that I hear you, but I also have to hear the other 90-something plus thousand voices that are represented in this community. So to limit yourself to 3 minutes to, again, whether it's a referendum or you're just wanting to intimidate, you've hamstringed yourself in the process of being civically engaged. So why not create a different space in order for that to happen? And I don't think we shouldn't be centered at it. The community should be centered at it. You should be looking towards each other to create that space. Take us, the elected officials, out of the equation.
So I'm cheating and looking at the question again. So the question around constraints on free speech in private and public meetings. So in public meetings, I think the constraint for the individual participating, Patrick and Amber have really well stated, but essentially in a limited public forum, there are constraints around when the time of the meeting is. There can be basic decorum. What are the three? They are Shannon. Shannon Campbell is here. The other lawyer. So the time, manner, and place, and we set those expectations. But the place where I'm seeing opportunity for because it's not a public park, the boardroom is not a public park, so you're not going to have the same ability to say all the things that I was mentioning a younger version of me might have done. But the other place where free speech is happening really actively and is something that I think people should be thinking about, I'm sure you all are, the other forum is our social media. And one thing that's happened for me, and I'm not saying any of this to be provocative, but it's just fact, and I know that a lot of you have seen it, and I know it's happened for other people on this panel as well, But what is not limited is that someone can take the things that I have said in a meeting, and they can commodify it. They can turn it into something they put on their YouTube channel, and then they can make statements about it. We all want to be able to make comments about what our leaders are doing. I will tell you, I have made some comments recently about some of the choices our leaders have made. But what's happened for me in that act of being able to utilize an experience in a board meeting is that has gone viral. And I now have people from all over the country, and as does my colleague Shannon and Ann, making threats because they feel that my actions are impeding their free speech, or that I am not an advocate for free speech. And these are not like grow thick skin kind of comments. These are, and again, I don't want to be crass, but these are threats of violence. I should be cut open, or I should be assaulted in some way or another, or put over someone's knee. And those are challenging things to hear. It's really made an impact on my psyche. I'm a school board member, y'all. And this is common. This is not new. So in our effort to keep free speech free, which I believe in as a core value, we have to make sure that we've created those spaces for folks. But there's a balance of when have we gone so far that we're now at a place where a young man's getting shot in Utah, whether I agree with that individual or not. And in that day that Mr. Kirk passed away or was murdered, the TikTok algorithm picked up, and my video picked up. And on that day, people started sending me threats again. So what's happening in our ideas of free speech is we are all being tricked. You are getting fed ideas that most meet what makes you comfortable, because we are no longer willing to have conversations with people that don't make us comfortable. And it is finding those spaces where we can do that I think is really important. And I don't know how we as elected officials do that in a safe way, but that's something we have to be really honest about. This is a whole new world that shouldn't be happening so commonly.
If I could just pick up where Kelly was with the social media part. 60 Minutes had a segment with Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah. I encourage everybody to watch it. He was talking about hate speech in America. And what he said is that social media algorithms are a cancer on steroids. And this isn't like when I was a kid and we were all worried about lyrics in music or violence in video games or anything like that. These algorithms are designed to suck you in, and they are designed to keep you in TikTok or Facebook or whatever it is. And when they pick up on what you're liking and forwarding, they send you more of it. And that's the cancer part. Think about a cancer cell replicating. So eventually you end up in this echo chamber of hate speech or whatever speech, and you get all wizzo-sprung. And we call it a Buddha loop, where you just keep getting looped and looped and looped. And again, going back to talking about people who maybe aren't emotionally stable, now they're sending emails. And all the emails that Kelly gets and Patrick gets and Amber gets, I get. But I also get their email, because now we've got to start looking at, is there a crime that's taken place? And y'all would be surprised at some of the emails that people send. They're not crimes, but they are the coarsest emails you've ever read. And someone like me who's been looking at this stuff for 35 years, I'm already messed up beyond repair. I am not a normal person anymore. But these are normal people that don't see this stuff. They talk about a police officer in the course of their career is exposed to about 180 to 200 traumatic events. The normal person, y'all, experience 2 to 3 in your lifetime. And so when Charlie Kirk was murdered, a whole bunch of people saw that video within a very short period of time. That's not something any of us should see. And your social media feeds keep sending you that stuff, and it keeps dividing us. And if there's anything that we can do is step away from that stuff. I know I sound like an old dude when I'm saying that, mostly because I am, but it's not healthy for us. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm subscribed. I ride motorcycles, so I'm in these motorcycle groups. These are like old guys riding Goldwings. It's an old guy motorcycle. Some guy will post on there about how they customize their bike. And instead of everybody saying, hey, that's cool or whatever, you'll have a handful of people jumping on there saying, well, that's stupid. Why did you do that? Why? It's the guy's motorcycle. It says he did it. Why do you have to tell him it's dumb? Why do you have to tell him it looked better before? Don't say anything. I mean, I'm to the point where I can't even get on a Goldwing motorcycle page anymore. And so, that's the kind of stuff that, for me personally, stepping back away from that has improved my mental health tremendously. Now, I can't escape the emails that I get from all over the world because somebody saw a video on YouTube. By the way, Kelly, I have over 100,000 views on mine, so when you get 100,000, but it's too bad, and they're from all over the world. I mean, these aren't my people, and I consider you all my people. These aren't Lauren's people. These are people who see a video and think everything on it's true, and they tell me I should do whatever, and it's really sad. That's not going to help anybody. So let's get off social media for a while. Feel up your mental health.
I don't have too much to add on that because I'm not an elected official, but I just wanted to reiterate, the media fragmentation point I made before, and that's what we're hearing again here. And also mention AI, which nobody's mentioned yet, which is now they can take your words and reorganize them and reorder them into something you didn't say that looks like something you did say. And so that is a huge threat, I think, to civil discourse, and I have no answers for that. But I just we need to name it, I think, as something that is going to just compound the problems we already have around creating opportunities for civil discourse.
I wanted to add real quick, we kind of spoke to it with everyone commenting, just the different layers of what we bring to ourselves as an elected official. Whether it is, a social worker, past organizer, whatnot, woman, white woman at that. So I mean, these are things that we don't need to be heard about, or we don't need to all lives matter them. It matters as a Black woman being on the city commission. It does, because I get the microaggressions, I get the gaslighting, I get all the things, I get the dog whistles of, oh, you're being aggressive, you're being rude, condescending. I think I was told I acted like a inner city middle schooler a couple of weeks ago, that I sound too intelligent. And that, I mean, these are all the things that come with the layers on top of the fact that I am an elected official. So, oftentimes, when we talk about these spaces and with deregulation of social media, I think folks go to these spaces to say the things that maybe they wouldn't say with their full chest in front of me, or they wouldn't say if they knew that it came with a fine, a fee, or jail time. And so I think, I tend to be a little bit pragmatic about things and know that, we hope for the best and you expect the worst, because there's just some people out there that wake up every day choosing violence and discomfort. And I don't know why. I don't think I've been commissioned to solve that. The best thing I can do is to challenge those in the community to get to know your community and to be able to identify what community is. Because I think a lot of us wrestle with that. We don't know what community is. Am I part of your community? We are in a community writ large, but what does that look like? And oftentimes when I hear people come to me about an issue, they're not necessarily coming to me about the issue as it relates to community. They're coming at it from their perspective, where they sit in the middle of that. So it's very person-centered, which is fine, but you can't person-center a community issue. You can't say, well, this is me, well, this is you, based on, but you don't speak for the entire community. So I think just kind of the nuances of that and recognizing, like, how do we really know our community, and from your perspective in creating whether it's civil discourse or having conversation around that is about, are you engaging with community? I have to. The idea of an elected official not engaging with community is just crazy to me. These are the days of age. No more ribbon cuttings and kissing babies. People want you to solve problems and create solutions. So I would say, again, giving the work back as much as it's my job, my duty, and my sworn oath to represent individuals in this community, it should be just as much as your commitment to me as an elected official to do that same work.
Thank you. We are at time to start listening to your comments and questions. So I'm just going to start with the ones that Ruthie handed to me, and anyone feel free to comment. How much leniency should be given in a public meeting to individuals who choose to make personal attacks and use obscene language?
That is a great question, and one that I think the courts are trying to figure out right now. It is an interesting role to be. I sometimes feel as chair on the Douglas County Commission, listening to public comment, that I need a law degree because we don't always know. I think each one of the school board and the city commission and the county commission all have their own legal representation, and they might have 3 different legal opinions on that question. And it is something our courts are tackling right now. So I don't feel like I can answer that. And that's just something we as a society are working on.
I'll just second that and say that First Amendment jurisprudence is a hot mess. And like even the U.S. Supreme Court justices don't agree on what the free speech provisions of the First Amendment mean right now. So it's kind of like the Wild West and kind of good luck. Godspeed me then, whatever. Well, you just, so it's unclear. There are some general principles right around time, place, and manner restrictions where, public meetings, you can put some restrictions on how long everyone can speak. Decorum kinds of things, when it's open and when it's closed, and those kinds of things. But what you can't do is regulate content, right? You can't say, today we're only going to allow people to speak who are in favor of this bill. That is unconstitutional, that's clear. So there are a few bright line principles that are clear, but most of it is murky and contested, and different federal circuit courts, which are the appeals courts right below the Supreme Court, are reaching different outcomes on similar facts and similar legal questions. And so it is a mess. And so if you're confused, you're genuinely, I genuinely agree with that confusion because it's very cluttered right now.
Thank you. Here's another comment, or really question. I've tried and want to try again to offer space and time for conversation, civil, friendly, etc. I can't get Fox News types to come. When I ask individuals, they seem fearful.
So I'm going to go back to Spencer Cox again, not because I'm a Spencer Cox fan. I didn't know who he was before all of this, but he started an organization called Disagree Better. I would encourage y'all to check it out. It's disagreebetter.us. He and the National Governors Association started this movement. I've got the how-to guide right here for how to disagree better. Two-sided document, printed it out, brought it with me. But one of the things that they talk about, and when he campaigned with his Democratic opponent, and they did an ad together. And he also, when they did this campaign, they talked to, or it was he and Jared Powell, the Democratic governor from Colorado. And he's all about trying to create better discourse, better disagreement. But one thing he talks about was, I don't know who was talking, somebody said trying to get the Fox News types there. Maybe if you're not a Fox News type, you have to play one on TV. So, you argue the other person's perspective, and that's how you get that other perspective into your group. And I think trying to understand where somebody else is one of the principles for having better discourse. He talked about if you don't see eye to eye, use your ears instead. And I think that's a great way to think about it. So often we're not discoursing to be able to understand, we're discoursing to be able to make our point. And so I think it's important for us to consider those other viewpoints. One of the other suggestions they talk about is have coffee with somebody that you don't agree with. not gonna be fun, but when we go to parties, how often do we look around and everybody either looks like us or thinks like us? Make that difficult choice. As police, we get to interact with people every day who don't look like us, who don't agree with us, who don't think the same way we do. Most of the time it's on their worst day. But I always encourage my officers to do community engagement in areas where they wouldn't normally go, in areas that maybe aren't police friendly, and find out why. Find out why does somebody feel that way. And hopefully we can get them to look at police differently. And that promotes community trust. And that promotes people feeling better about their police and not just looking to us on their worst day. But like tonight, y'all are here because you didn't want to watch the Chiefs game. But I've had a chance to now interact with all of you when it's not a stressful thing. Nobody's in trouble. Nobody's going to jail tonight. And so we can all have a conversation about something police related, something not police related, something that is human about both of us. I've got 7 kids. You want to talk kids? We can talk kids. I got some purple socks on. If you like purple socks, I like to wear. Yeah, there we go. I know. But it's like we're all people, and I think that we forget about the humanity on the other side of our comments, and we lose sight of that fact. We all have worth because we're human beings, and we all deserve respect because we're human beings. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're the $1 million CEO or the homeless person on the street in Lawrence, you all deserve respect because we're people. And that's what we lose sight of when we're a keyboard warrior, when we're directing some hate speech at somebody. We can all disagree, but let's agree that we're all human beings and we all deserve respect.
Thank you. These are 2 different questions, but I think they're kind of asking the same thing. And this is maybe just asking you to go a little further or use our imaginations a little more. And one of the questions is, in what way would you make Lawrence better for you and me? And I think it's kind of in the same spirit as, okay, so as officials, you've made it clear that you can't create places for dialogue. Where can we, as a community, create places for conversation? The library?
Coffee shops.
So I do think we create spaces for dialogue. I think Patrick might have been talking about the 3 minutes at I don't want to speak for Patrick, but I do think we create spaces for dialogue at least at the school board level, and have tried to meet with community members. I mean, personally, I'll just take COVID as an example. I was board president during COVID. I met with hundreds of people individually in meetings and also in groups. And anytime there's something contentious, I try to make space in committee meetings and board meetings. And so we've had very difficult conversations together, and we've done it beautifully. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything you said or you agreed with everything I said. I can think of moments that I've been in leadership roles, and not just on the board, where we have had conversations that either moved me in another direction or were really difficult, and I left with that shared value piece. I am a faculty member at the KU School of Social Welfare. 2 of my colleagues are in the room right now, and I want to say hey to them. But in my classroom, we do this shared values exercise where they have to, actually 3 of them, I'm seeing lots of us, that you have to pick a side and present it. You have to find what the shared value is. And that exercise, I just take it everywhere I go. I do it every semester with students. I go out into the world and I take it everywhere I go. So I guess I would disagree that we're not doing it. I think we need to lift up the places where we are doing it and then do it again.
Thank you.
So can you say the question again?
One of the questions was, in what way would you make Lawrence better for you and me? And so as officials, you made it clear that you can't create places for dialogue. Where can we as community create places for conversation? The library?
If you're asking just Amber, taking my commissioner hat off, I do agree to a point with Kelly that we're doing some things. But I think as our country evolves, and how government and how individuals participate in it, that's evolving. So it's a constant moving of the goalposts. So do I think we're doing it? I think to some aspect we're doing it. Are we doing it collectively? No. No, we're not. We're just not. And, I think it goes, I can take this existential and I can blame it all on capitalism and white supremacy and all the things that we know to be true. But as it comes here to Lawrence, I think oftentimes, and I've shared this in different groups, that oftentimes we take for granted the adage that we have that unmistakable identity, that Lawrence has a vibe. And we do have a vibe. And I think oftentimes we take that vibe for granted because we like what it does for us. We like the look it gives us, how people talk about us, how we're perceived. But we don't really, many of us haven't done the work to understand why that vibe exists, the history of it, the importance of it, or the validity, that it should have, because we just like being able to wear it. So whether that's performative or cosplay, I don't know. That's a discussion for us to have. But I think what I think I've heard it and I'll continue to speak to is that, I always put myself in difficult situations. Oftentimes I find myself in challenging and difficult conversations with individuals simply because they're wanting to test me because I'm an elected official. They want to test me because I'm Black. They want to test me because I'm a Black woman, and I get all the cues of, well, I'm not being mean because I have a Black friend, or I've worked with other Black people or people of color, and all these things. And so we start to put a qualifier around why I'm being this way to you. And we don't have to. Just say what you have to say, but know that we have to give that energy back to each other, and it doesn't have to be negative energy. So again, it gets to the point where I don't want to, problem articulators will always exist, but problem articulators don't move. We don't create change by articulating the problem. We create change by recognizing what I can do and what you can do, what we can do to move towards solutions and create solutions, be solution creators. So, I think I come from my lens is a little bit different because I don't think there's ever been a day, no matter where I lived or what position I've had professionally or personally, where I've not felt like the weight of the world is always on me and that I'm having to prove myself and include myself in community. And this being an elected official hasn't changed that. That level of disregard outweighs just as much as the necessary accolades, but just some of the positive energy that I receive. And so, I think this goes back to understanding community. That was a question that we had when I was in grad school was, for public administration is what is community? And we're still asking that question now in 2025, and we were definitely asking that question before. So my thing is what is community? And are there individuals, groups in your community that you are not in community with? And what are you doing to be in community with them? Because again, you don't have a holistic view. So you're giving a biased view whenever you're stating something, and I don't think you can qualify it by saying, I'm not engaged with these individuals or haven't been able to understand this perspective. That's okay, because then if I hear that means you are admitting that maybe you haven't done all the work. There's still work for you to do. There's still work that you're seeking to understand. And I think that I feel like is a genesis to taking, the sting out of civil discourse, to say, I don't know all the things. Because I don't know all the things. I get told that all the time. And I know you don't know all the things. And I can bet on that. So why are we coming at each other? Or why do we come to each other knowing that we don't know all the things, but we want to pretend, we want to cosplay? And I think that's what perpetuates a lot of the frustration and intensity that we receive, not just we as elected officials, just we as human beings engaging with each other. We come at each other in a way that it's like, I gotta be negative, I gotta be better than you. But I'm like, that rugged individualism, it's just, it has our nation in a chokehold, and it perpetuates the very thing that we see here.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to comment on that before we maybe move to closing? I think this last pair of questions might be worth asking and under the wire. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm glad somebody asked this. How do you find good news and hope while not ignoring our reality? And maybe similarly, in order to encourage engagement by individuals and running for public office, what do you tell them? Why is it worth taking the risk? Why is it worth assuming the responsibility of these roles?
I'll quickly answer the first one, which is I see hope every day in the faces of my law students. Right, they've come to KU Law, just like students have come to law school all around the country, in a time where the rule of law is up for grabs, when democracy is in peril, and they're here to preserve that. They're doing really hard work. And although we don't all agree on everything about what the law does or should do, they come with it. They come to law school from a position of good faith in wanting to uphold the rule of law and democracy. So they can be hope every day in a really dark time.
Yeah, I think you've got to make it happen. I don't, I've been around for 57 years, and everybody always talks about, hey, things aren't like they used to be, and they're not. They're not ever going to be. So I think what I tell new police officers, and I see the same thing, Kyle, with my new police officers, where they're all idealists, they're all going to save the world. Every single new police officer when we interview them says, I took this job because I want to help people. And 35 years later, I still say the same thing. I'm still an idealist after 35 years. I don't know why I'm not cynical, but I work very hard to not be. But one of the things I tell them is, if you look around and all of your friends are police officers, you need to get a hobby that doesn't involve police officers. If you only hang out with people that are like you, that's the way your world looks. So I ride motorcycles. It gives me a chance to meet people that I wouldn't normally meet. I do photography, so I can meet artists. The first time somebody called me an artist, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not an artist. I am. I do pictures, that's art. And but it was like just weird. So I get to meet all kinds of people in the art community because of that. So get out there and find a hobby that brings you joy. And when I'm out on the back roads of Kansas on my motorcycle, there's beauty everywhere. There's no negativity in my ear. There's just music. And it refreshes my soul. And it's what keeps me happy. It's what keeps me hopeful. So on 3 Tuesday nights a month, when I get to hear all the negativity with Commissioner Sellers, I have my battery charged up to do it.
Never offered me a ride. I feel some type of way about that. I recently found out that my great-great-great-grandparents on my mom's side, their first stop before they went to Oklahoma was Kansas. They were ex-investors. So after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and the war was over, they came from Georgia to Kansas. They made Kansas their first stop because they felt safe here. And then went on. And so I take pride in knowing that my ancestors didn't escape bondage, but left the place where their bondage was to come to Kansas. So I love Kansas. I love traveling, but I love making Kansas my home. And through all of this ugliness, I still love it. I've lived almost in every corner of the state other than Northwest, because they get a lot of weather and all kind of interesting stuff up there. I'll take Sandy, but that's about it as far as you can get me to Northwest Kansas. But I say all that to say is that I do what I do unapologetically because it's service and we're humans. And I know there's a quote that several people have been attributed to it, that, service is the rent we pay for living here on earth. I would actually say that service is ingrained in us as human beings. We cannot be without each other. And great civilizations, great communities lend themselves to each other. So to not be in service is to be inhuman or inhumane. And so when we are in service to each other and serving one another in whatever capacity that is, we are building community, we are strengthening community, we are strengthening humankind. So I do this work because I feel like this is my small little part at this small little time in the galaxy, in the history, and all the things of this universe and the galaxies beyond and times 10. This is my little part of contributing to advancing and strengthening humankind. And that it takes a lot from you. It takes a lot of, it's not about thick skin or thin skin. That is patriarchal tropes that we tell people when you haven't had the benefit of the doubt and the privilege of being male and white in the space. Because I have to tell someone that has nothing to do with my skin, as my heart is a stake about all of this. But it does take a lot of vulnerability. And so what I share with individuals is that we experience vulnerability in all different aspects of our life. So don't let that be the reason to not serve. Let your reason to serve be that you want to do your part to protect, advance, grow, strengthen, and love on humankind. So I know it sounds very, whimsical, but I mean, that's the truth that I was raised on, and apparently 4,096 ancestors died in order to make sure I was here, so if it worked for them, it works for me.
My answer is so easy. I get to do this on behalf of kids. So you should all want to be on the school board. I mean, it's a really great gig, even with all of the stuff that I've said. It is such a privilege. I come from very limited means. I'm a person that didn't, my mom was very young when she had me. We didn't have a lot. And I'm here today. I got a dog, I got a couple kids in college, I'm a first generation college graduate, and public education is the reason why I have the quality of life I do. Why would I not want to get up in service to that? It's remarkable where I'm at compared to my mother, just because of public education and educators like Patrick and a couple of you in this room that I recognize. What a great privilege. And here's the other thing, if you're on the school board, I did have a hard time convincing people to run this time. I was a little bit, and I don't know, I think maybe my colleague might have stepped out, but I was a little reticent to tell people, you should really get into this, because I wasn't feeling good about it. I felt like it was carried inherent risk all of a sudden. I didn't know how I felt about that. And I'll tell you, really good people showed up, and smart, talented people want to do this because it's a privilege to get to do it. So I'm grateful that Lawrence gave me the opportunity to participate in making our public schools better and stronger. And it's just been such an honor. And you get to read to 5-year-olds. I don't know if I mentioned 5-year-olds earlier, but they let you go. I don't know why they do this, but they let me read in classrooms. It's amazing. I really recommend it. But I know we talked about shared values. I just want to tell you really quickly. So those emails that I mentioned and the voicemails and all of that I've been getting. So I feel like I've got to read them and listen to them to see in part what they have to say, but also just in case there's something in there that I need to give to Chief Lockhart. Okay? So I'm reading through one the other day, and I'm like, it's all the words and all the misogyny and all of that, and I'm really good at it now. So I'm all the way down to the bottom, and it says, and those glasses aren't doing anything for you. And I was like, oh my God, I knew it! I knew these were bad glasses, and I just had a long conversation with my 2 daughters who think they're all that in a bag of chips in New York City, and I thought they were so wrong, I knew it. And this guy in Georgia is all about, I should not have these round glasses on. So anyway, you find things that you share with people if you really unpack it a little bit, so, yeah.
Well, we are, I don't know, Patrick, do you want to take us home here? Because we're going to close.
Yeah, I know I'm between you and the Chiefs, so I'll be very brief and short. I would just say a few things. One is, I believe in what's possible. I don't know what's possible. I only have the experiment up to this very moment. And I might meet one of you, or talk to one of you, or hear something from Kelly, or Amber, or any of these great panelists said tonight, and something else becomes possible, and that's what gives me hope. I believe very strongly in the democracy of this country, emotionally so. I believe that whatever challenge has been put in front of us is there to make us stronger. It is not to tear us down. And so to me, for all of the angst that we may feel in a moment, in a challenge, it is to help us see the world in a new and better way. And maybe that way will give us something that's possible that we didn't even dream before we started that. So for people who are thinking of running, if you like helping people, if you like talking about challenges, if you like making people uncomfortable, I've been doing it since 1970, like, this is the job for you. I love helping people, and I love helping think about what's possible and what are we willing to give up to get to that thing. So you gave up time to come to here tonight and to listen to us and to ask your great questions. I'm going to stick around for a little bit. No pressure on my panelists. I'm taping the game. So, but thank you for putting this on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.